April the 14th, 2024. Yisrael, Medad, may I kindly ask you to introduce yourself briefly and please tell me how are you today?
My name is Yisrael Medad. I am presently talking to you from Shiloh, which is about 28 miles, about 45 kilometers north of Jerusalem, where I have been living since 1981. I've been in Israel since 1970. Right now I am retired, but I was a media monitor involved in politics, a spokesman for the Jewish communities beyond the Green Line in Judea and Samaria, and I still contribute newspaper columns more than occasionally.
So yesterday, Iran attacked Israel. How are you? How is your family? How is the situation in Israel right now?
Well, I'm quite embarrassed to say that I slept through everything. I was very confident in the ability of our security forces to do the best they could. When I woke up in the morning, I was absolutely surprised to find out that very little damage was done. Of course, it's been a difficult time because the amount of missiles, the amount of effort by Iran in this case was amazing that such an event could take place and it sort of just moves along. Or other people say it's the beginning of World War III, which is a little bit ridiculous. But I'm glad that at the present moment, the attack is over. And I hope that Iran realizes that this is not the way to do business with Israel.
Do you think that the conflict has now more players? As we know, Hezbollah fires missiles against Israel for a couple of months now, as also the Houthi militia from Yemen. They are attacking Israel, and you also are receiving missiles still, I think, from Gaza by Hamas. Is that right?
From Gaza, very much reduced. But the point you're making, if I could expand on it, is that Israel has been complaining for a number of years that not only is Iran's nuclear development program dangerous for Israel, for the region, and probably for the world, but that Iran has been pursuing a policy of encirclement, of trying to make sure that Israel is closed in from the north, the east, and the south. And that is basically taking place. Both, as you mentioned, the Houthis in Yemen, which also affects European shipping from the north, from Hezbollah and from Iran itself, and also from Gaza. And the fact is that the United States, I think Britain, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all participated last night in the defense of the region because they weren't as much there to save Israel, although that, of course, was very much part of it, but to stem, to block the ability of Iran to completely overthrow the stability of the region, which is very dangerous for everybody.
Since the terror attacks on October the 7th, what changed in your life? How did it affect your life in Shiloh and the life of your friends and family?
Well, on a personal nature, one of my two sons has just gone into the reserve army service for the second time. The first time he was in for about close to 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. I've had a neighbor's boy who was killed here, fighting in Gaza. We have another son of someone who lives here and who grew up here, although he doesn't live here at the present, who was a hostage, who was abducted and is in Gaza. So this is very much a close personal experience that we've gone through. I must also say it's shaken many people's confidence in the ability of the army not to fight, but to be prepared to fight, to be on the ball, as we say, with intelligence and with quick mobilization, which the IDF has always been famous for, completely fell through on October 7th. The only shining star was the volunteering of many citizens and army officers on reserve and policemen who rushed down to the south to take care of this, which shows that Israeli society is very much unified and altruistic in going all out for everybody's safety and security.
Do you still feel safe in Israel since October 7 or in Shiloh particularly?
I've always felt safe, even though I always am anxious a bit and cautious. There's no success in being fearful in one's life. Unfortunately, for example, just 2 days ago, we found out that a 14-year-old shepherd boy was killed brutally near Shiloh, and it proves that there's an ongoing irrational hatred beyond a national conflict or something over borders or land that we face, and that makes it very disappointing to be involved in such a period of time and in such a conflict.
Right now, there are some cases at the International Court of Justice concerning Israel. One case is dealing also with the so-called settlement in the West Bank. Are you following these cases?
I try to. I'm not going to say it's day to day. I'm very disappointed both in Israel, official Israel, who I think are not adequately defending what I call Jewish national identity, from which flows the idea that we have the perfect right to be living in Judea and Samaria. We are not illegal. We are not engaged in apartheid. And in Gaza, we are not engaged in genocide. Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowing any humanitarian aid in or anything else. This is unfortunately a regurgitation of certain types of anti-Semitism, or simply inability to deal with the Jew as a Jew. And even though that we've gone through such a long history, we still have people who prefer to fight that type of a battle, to portray the Jew as the eternal other and the evil one, rather than dealing with elements of the conflict, which are very political, very ideological, and have been going on now for the past 100 years, since the 1920s.
In Germany, we also face the conflict in the Middle East. For example, a few weeks ago, a judge of the Constitutional Court of Israel was assaulted at the University of Berlin. She could not deliver her speech because she was interrupted by people who were shouting her very bad things to her. And this is just one case of many. Are you following a little bit the situation that's going on in other countries, attacks that have background of anti-Semitism?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to be a little bit awkward. It's not so much anti-Semitism, which does exist, but it's like, in my mind, and I wrote an article about it, it's exporting the policy of terrorizing Jews abroad to Europe and the United States on campuses, public appearances, concerts, conferences. It's not a question, and I myself, I've demonstrated for Soviet Jewry back in the 1960s, and I've been part of the activist trend, shall we say, but it was never about completely shutting down any sort of discourse or dialogue or not allowing anyone to talk, which is what's happening in the past year or so, with outrageous claims. And we're not engaged in any sort of rational discussion anymore about rights, about crimes, about policies. It's just, let's do away with Zionism altogether. It's like a complete eliminationist type of approach, which I don't think really belongs in progressive, liberal, left-wing politics, but is more sort of left-wing totalitarian fascism, which has made an appearance in the past, and I think we're suffering from at the present moment.
And what do you think about the BDS movement, the boycott, sanctions, divestment, which has a substantial influence in Europe and in the United States?
Again, it doesn't make sense. And even when I've personally tried to start to talk to people or correspond with people, no one is open to argumentation. I'm very sorry. I'm a little bit older than I'd like to be, but I remember going through college when the whole idea was to debate, to ask questions of your professor, to be corrected, to accept the fact that I might be wrong if I don't have the facts, or my logic is not what it should be. And today I'm facing a lot of anti-Israel activists that completely shut down their minds to receiving information or to be probed or questioned about their ideas and their opinions and positions. And that's very bothering to me on a global scale, even more or as equally as my concern for Israel and Zionism.
The settlements in Gaza were evicted, and Jews from Gaza have to live somewhere else in Israel. Could you imagine, as a citizen of Shiloh, could you imagine to leave the West Bank and to live in a place in Israel?
No, to be honest, because we're talking about over 500,000 Jews, Jewish Israelis living in Judea and Samaria, and over 220,000 living in, shall we call it, the new neighborhoods or the post-67 neighborhoods of an expanded Jerusalem. That's a huge amount of people. And we're also talking about a serious geographical and topographical security threat if the hills, especially of Samaria, but also Judea, are handed back over to the PLO or the Palestinian Authority, whatever you want to call it. And if you ask me if I'm afraid, will we be repeating what happened with Gaza and Hamas? When we, as you said, we left completely Gaza, and yet very quickly we had rockets, and I think maybe 5 or even a half a dozen rounds of hostilities ever since then, including this last one. So it doesn't make sense, and it won't lead to any sort of tranquility or peace or anything similar.
And what do you think about the recent protest against the government in Israel? I know there have been protests all the years, you know, it's quite normal. But is it something special or different, the protest that happened recently?
Well, I think it's a long discussion on that one.
Just short, briefly.
Very briefly, there is a certain element of Israel's left-wing, secular, elitist population, those who sort of, in one way or another, not completely, are the remnants of the old Mapai labor establishment from the 1950s and 60s into the 70s, who feel threatened by the rise of the national wing, the Haredi or ultra-Orthodox political forces, and the national religious forces. And they have gone all out in order to counter this on multi-fronts, whether it's the judicial reform, whether it's the war, whether it's the hostages. And again, I see more of an element of irrationality than thinking through the situation, which is leading us into a dark place.
Yeah, finally, I would like to know what's your personal perspective. Now, you said you're retired, you want to stay in Shiloh, but as you know, there are attacks against Israel from different directions, from different players. So what would be now the perspective, if you may give us an outlook at the end of our conversation?
Well, I could quote my grandmother, who in her Yiddish used to say, "It's very difficult to be a Jew." From a very young age, I knew that it wasn't the most easy thing to do. And many of us are brought up on that sort of subconscious challenge that we're never left alone, whether it's our religious observance, whether it's our national identity, whether it's our policies. Someone somewhere will always find something wrong. And it can't be changed. It has deep roots, not only in anti-Semitism, but it's also social thinking of people who need someone not to like. And we're the eternal ones, unfortunately. There are other people around. I'm not saying we're the only people who get a bad deal, but I am used to it. Many of my friends are used to it. And I think we'll try to continue to overcome the animosity of the opposition for mankind, whether Israel is in industry, high tech, medicine, many other fields which Israel has made contributions to the world. And I think that will hold us in very good stead in the years to come.
May I kindly ask you to say the quote in Yiddish, if you remember it?
Zayn shver a Yid.
Thank you
My
so
Yiddish
much.
is good.
Thank you so much. And I wish that everybody stays safe. And thank you for being kind to talk to me. And yeah, I wish you all the best for the future. And maybe we will see us again. I remember very well when I visited you in Shiloh, and hopefully there will be another occasion.
I thank you very much for allowing me to be on the program and talking to you and the audience. And I wish everybody good health and a good sense of thinking up here in the top.
Thank you so much, Yisrael, Medad.
Bye bye, Martin.